Hello and welcome to Mobility Technology and Marketing. Hopefully, you guys can hear this. I had a bit of a debacle trying to get the audio to work, but I've tested it out and I figured out what the problem was, and I think you can hear me sounding clear this time. So let's get right into it. What are we going to talk about today? Um, I'm going to introduce myself, reintroduce myself, and then I'm going to also talk about what the course is made up of, the three pillars of the course, and I'm going to get right into the lecture. And so, who am I? My name is TK Walker. I'm composed of three items, as I like to say: an educator, entrepreneur, and translator. When I say educator, that's self-explanatory. Entrepreneur, I do own a web-based company called eventgrabber.com, in which it is a local event-based site for a centralized place for aggregating local events and determining what's best fit for you based on your personal interest. And translator, not a translator in the sense of a language, but a translator in the sense of I am a translator of technology or technical terms. And so I kind of am the bridge between layman's and high tech. I'm going to start this over. Hello and welcome to Mobility Technology and Marketing. My name is TK Walker. I am your course director, and hopefully you're able to hear this. I had some issues with the audio during the first recording, but I've tested it out and I'm pretty sure you can hear it this time. And so what are we going to talk about today? First, I'm going to introduce myself, my background, and then I'm going to go into a course overview, what the course is made of, what I expect for you to gain from the course, and then I'm going to jump right into the lecture. This first week is talking about mainly the evolution of wireless and mobility technologies. Okay, so who am I? Once again, my name is TK Walker. I am made up of three things I like to say, which is an educator, entrepreneur, and a translator. The educator part is probably self explanatory as you're listening to an education piece right now. The entrepreneur part, though, however, I do own a small startup company called eventgrabber.com, which essentially is a repository for local events that recommends them based on your personal interests. And then for the translation part, I don't translate a language. I'm a translator of technology. And so I'm the bridge between high technical terms or understandings and layman's terms, taking complex items and breaking them down into chewable bits that anyone can understand. My background is in electrical engineering and computer science, and I was born in South Florida, specifically Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I have a 5-year-old son, which I like to call my mini me, and I've spent some time doing web development, mobile consulting, as well as working on my startup. And so, what is my expectations? My expectations from you is to give me your best, respect others, don't be afraid to ask for help, and have fun. And here's how you contact me. This information is most likely on FSO. But if it's not on FSO or there's something in particular, here's how to contact me. As for office hours, obviously you guys are virtual, but if you need to schedule some time to talk with me individually, please feel free. I'm open to that. I've done that before. And I actually like to extend a helping hand for you guys to understand the concept or talk about an issue. And so let's get right into it. I had a chance to send out an email to you guys to try to get a chance to know you each individually, and I welcome any responses to that so I can get a chance to figure out, who you are and a little bit about yourself. So, history of wireless. Once again, the course is broken down into three components. We're going to talk about wireless technology, that's mainly talking about the signal or infrastructure to be able to communicate. Mobility technology, wireless can fit under mobility also, but mobility in the terms of the devices, the mobile devices that is that you use to communicate with using a wireless signal. And then the marketing aspect of it is digital marketing. And so we're going to put them focus on the digital market. That's the digital message that you send through these channels, that you send a marketing message to an end user. Okay. And so the first week is mainly just talking about the evolution of wireless mobility and sports marketing. And then the following week, we're going to modernize technologies. And so I'm going to begin with a video, and you should be able to. There's a video on your sheet. If you look into your FSO, I've made a video lesson sheet in your reference guide that has all of the videos that I will show. And so the first video will be the history of wireless, and you can pull that up on YouTube yourself by clicking on the link, and we will begin watching that video now.
In the beginning, man resorted to shouting to make himself heard beyond his immediate surroundings. Then, as now, the human voice could only carry so far. Later, when people learned to master fire, they used signal fires, placing them on hilltops or other clearly visible landmarks. In ancient China, signal fires were used to quickly warn the forces when the Great Wall was being attacked. In the 18th century, the optical telegraph made it possible to send coded messages. The average distance between the telegraph stations was around 10 kilometers, but could be up to 3 times that across waters. Samuel Morse was originally an American artist who was to become famous for his electric alphabet. In 1835, he presented the world's first commercial telegraph. For this new device, he developed the Morse code, based on short and long signals. It survived by far the primitive equipment it was designed for, and is still used today, both commercially and by radio amateurs. At the end of the 19th century, Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi invented wireless signaling. By 1901, he'd managed to transmit a Morse-coded wireless message across the Atlantic, from Poldhu in Cornwall, UK, to St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. A real breakthrough in radio came in 1906, when Lee de Forest invented the triode, the first radio tube that could be used as an amplifier. This was the first step of modern electronics. At sea, the introduction of modern radio equipment on an increasing number of vessels meant that safety increased. At the same time, a new message was learnt. 3 short signals, 3 long signals, and finally 3 short signals again. SOS. Save our souls. When the Titanic sank in 1912, it was the first naval disaster where wireless telegraphy and the SOS played an important role in saving lives. Although over 1,500 persons lost their lives, over 700 were saved by assisting vessels who picked up the Titanic's SOS signals over the radio.
Now wait a minute, Fred.
With the invention of radio came the first public radio stations. A wireless at home became the highest fashion. The family would sit together to hear news and entertainment. And right from the start, people were experimenting with radios in the car. They worked, but perhaps the antenna was a bit bulky. During the two world wars, the need for wireless communication, both for the fighting forces and secret agents, led to the rapid development of smaller and more efficient equipment. In the early 1940s, we learnt a new word: walkie-talkie, the predecessor to the mobile phone. By the outbreak of the Second World War, radio positioning was well known to both the Germans and the Allies. In order to conceal their positions from German U-boats, Allied convoys maintained strict radio silence, using the optical telegraph instead. In the childhood of radio, the idea of building a mobile telephone was seen as more of a joke than a serious vision of the future. It wasn't until after the war that we saw the first serious solutions for mobile telephony. In 1956, the world's first automatic mobile telephone system, the Ericsson MTA, was introduced. With one base station in Stockholm and one in Gothenburg, it served a total of 25 subscribers, 19 of them in Stockholm. In 1981, the NMT system was launched in Scandinavia. NMT provided national coverage in both Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland. In those days, the telephones were still bulky, stowaway items, mainly intended for use in vehicles. It took almost another decade for mobile phones to shrink in size and weight, under half a kilo, and thus achieve pocket success. The introduction of GSM and similar digital standards saw the emergence of ever smaller and lighter phones, even breaking the magical 100-gram mark. GSM and short messaging service, more generally known as SMS, became a sweeping success on the mass market for mobile data traffic. In Sweden, with a population touching on 9 million, close to 500 million SMS messages were sent during the year 2000. SMS, however, is only the beginning. In the near future, your telephone will be able to do so much more, like play music, help you to book romantic dinners, or even help you make cash winnings. Ever since the first telephone, the idea of a video phone has been on most telecom inventors' minds. Well, now it isn't a dream anymore. In 1999, Ericsson demonstrated the world's first mobile video call. From 2001, 3G systems have started to blaze new trails all over the world. The video phone is just another example of how Ericsson made reality out of a vision. Ericsson.
So as you can see there, that video, looking at today's standard, this was back when Ericsson in 1999, they predicted something that already exists now, which is video chatting and picture taking with phones, etc. But pretty interesting how they took you through a journey of the history of wireless all the way back from its inception until what we have today. And so, speaking of history, what I want to put focus on now is looking at the top 10 critical moments, or what they call top 10 moments in wireless, that kind of also changed the way that we are today's times look at wireless. And starting with the first five, I'm going to talk about these five, and then there's some little short clips on each one of these moments that I want to show you guys as well. But look at the first commercial cell phone call was number one, followed by the world's first mobile radio system. Then the FCC licenses cellular as competitive. And then look at number four, the world's first portable cell phone. So don't get confused one, two, and four. The world's first commercial cell phone call, the world's first mobile radio system, and the world's first portable cell phone call. And then number five, FCC allows digital advanced cellular. And number six, Hedy Lamar's bright idea. You'll learn about spread spectrum in a second, and we still use that to today. Number seven is the significance of the first PCS auctions, followed by the significance of the 1993 OBRA in which Bill Clinton you'll see signed into act, and then AT&T Digital One rate. If you guys are old enough, you can remember that plan. And then rounding off the top 10 is the Telecom Act of 1996. And so let's take a look at these top 10 wireless moments and see how they've shaped our technology and standard today.
CTIA, the Wireless Association, presents a countdown of the top 10 U.S. wireless moments. At number 1, the first commercial cell phone call in the U.S., placed on October 13th, 1983. A small crowd gathered at Soldier Field in Chicago on October 13th, 1983, to witness history in the making. Bob Barnett, president of Ameritech Mobile Communications, placed a call from a Chrysler convertible to the grandson of Alexander Graham Bell in Germany. Their transatlantic conversation marked the inaugural call of the nation's first citywide commercial cellular system. 25 years later, CTIA President and CEO Steve Largent recognizes this important anniversary, taking a stroll down memory lane with industry pioneers Craig McCaw and John Stanton on the keynote stage at CTIA Wireless IT and Entertainment 2008 in San Francisco. On October 13, 1983, the wireless industry began. 25 years ago this fall, the first commercial wireless call was placed from a parking lot at Soldier Field in Chicago. The event was quickly overlooked, and it's fair to say that on October 13, 1983, there were far more wireless doubters than believers. Well, this morning we have the distinct honor and privilege to hear from two of our industry's most famous believers. Because of their vision, competitiveness, and unwavering belief in providing consumers with what they need, these two men alone created some of the most pioneering and groundbreaking wireless brands in history. Brands such as McCall Cellular, Western Wireless, VoiceStream, and Clearwire. It was amazing. We had, first of all, we were operating all independently at the time, and there were 30 companies that were making applications, and it's hard to fully appreciate, but the Bell system was in complete turmoil because just 6 months before the applications were due, the DOJ and AT&T agreed to the breakup. It hadn't even fully been resolved as to whether the wireless business was going to be with AT&T or with the RBOX at the time that the order was submitted to make applications. I was thinking, Craig, about your comment about size. AT&T, as a part of its argument in favor of getting 50 megahertz of 850 spectrum set aside for itself on a national basis, argued that by the year 2000 there would be 1 million wireless customers in the United States. They only missed it by 2 digits. Celebrating 25 remarkable years of mobile innovation, this milestone moment in 1983 marked the birth of an industry and opened the door to a whole new world of wireless, leading to a competitive, consumer-driven marketplace propelled by perpetual innovation and change to meet the demands of more than 260 million wireless users in the U.S. today. The first commercial cell phone call on October 13th, 1983, the number one moment in U.S. wireless history.
So there you have it. The first commercial cell phone call took place 1983. Let's move on to the second moment in the top wireless moments. It was the first mobile radio system. Check it out.
In 1946, AT&T deployed the first mobile radio system in St. Louis, Missouri. By the time the United States entered World War II, FM radio was a rising communications star. The strategic value of two-way radios on the battlefield spurred telecom companies to come up with innovative ways to carry over mobile technology into the private sector, such as Motorola's FM Handy-Talkie. AT&T's Bell Laboratories also returned from the battlefield with its share of wartime successes and peacetime goals. AT&T understood the huge potential of car-based and portable communications in the marketplace. They had a hunch that the evolution of wireless during the war would spark interest in using this technology in daily American life. AT&T wasted no time. In 1946, they received approval from the FCC to operate the first commercial public radio telephone service in St. Louis, Missouri. Though the service was limited to only 6 channels, it was an instant success. Within a year, AT&T's radio telephone service had spread to 25 other cities. Soon after After the debut of the St. Louis system, engineers at Bell Labs began looking for ways to increase the limited capacity of mobile telephone service. That's when the concept of cellular was born. In 1947, AT&T sketched out plans for a system that would give more people simultaneous access to spectrum by handing off calls from transmitter to transmitter, increasing overall capacity. But the cellular concept proved to be ahead of its time, and the FCC took no action on the proposal. It was about 20 years later, in 1968, that the government finally expressed a willingness to explore the concept of cellular communications. It would take another decade to get the first real-world experiments up and running, and yet another 5 years before cellular would first reach the public marketplace. Despite initial challenges, this milestone moment helped pave the way for the dream of wireless to become a reality for more than 260 million Americans. The 1946 deployment of the first mobile radio system in St. Louis. The number 2 U.S. wireless moment.
So there you have it, the first mobile radio system. Now let's go on to moment number three, which the FCC licenses cellular as competitive.
Number 3, in 1981, the FCC licenses cellular service as a competitive duopoly instead of a monopoly. Today's wireless consumers can make numerous choices of affordable products and services, and competition is a key reason why. But it took a long time for the federal government to realize the tremendous value of a competitive telecom service instead of the old-fashioned monopoly wireline model. Early in the 20th century, the federal government and telephone giant AT&T came to an understanding. The best approach to delivering telephone service was through one policy, one system, and universal service. This so-called natural monopoly featured only one provider per market, and that was the rule across the country. Competition was effectively prohibited, and the system stood virtually unchallenged for decades. Through the years, however, technology continued to evolve, exciting new innovations began to emerge, and more newcomers were knocking on the FCC's door for an opportunity to compete in the telecom space. With the tide of opinion turning in favor of competition, pressure was on the FCC to move away from the old monopoly model. On April 9, 1981, the Commission ruled that it would license cellular as a competitive service instead of a monopoly. This meant establishing more than one license per market for cellular providers and assigning them different frequencies. Traditional telephone service providers, such as the Bell companies, would get the B-side licenses, and alternative companies wanting to enter the new cellular market would be issued A-side licenses. The new structure shredded the monopoly model, made room for competition in the world of wireless, and led to an explosion of innovation and consumer choice that would grow the wireless marketplace into the multi-billion-dollar industry it is today, where nearly 260 million Americans are taking advantage of wireless each day. The FCC licenses cellular as a competitive service instead of a monopoly in 1981. The number 3 U.S. wireless moment.
Could you believe that? Prior to then, AT&T pretty much had a monopoly on the cellular marketplace. So thanks to that ruling, you're able to have other competitors, other options such as Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, etc. That was the number three moment, FCC making it a competitive landscape for everyone to join the marketplace.
In 1973, Marty Cooper and colleagues developed the first portable wireless phone called the Dynatac. The world's first portable cell phone, which measured more than a foot long, weighed almost 2 pounds, and cost nearly $4,000 when it finally reached the market, was invented and introduced to the world in 1973 by Dr. Martin Cooper and his colleagues at Motorola. A few months later, Cooper went on to accomplish another feat when he completed the first ever portable cell phone call on April 3, 1973. 35 years later, CTIA President and CEO Steve Largent commemorates this momentous occasion alongside Marty Cooper from the keynote stage at CTIA Wireless 2008 in Las Vegas.
But this morning we want to focus your attention on another historic wireless phone call, one that occurred 35 years ago. On April 3rd, 1973, a team of engineers at Motorola realized their professional dreams. Their feat was the completion of the first ever portable cellular phone call. The Motorola team member who made that call was an engineer by the name of Marty Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Marty Cooper. Hey, Marty. Welcome. Well, thank you. But it wasn't just the fact that the phone call was made. The more interesting part of the story was how it was made. While many of us would probably have used this historic call to get in touch with our mom or dad or spouse, Marty took a different route. Marty chose to use his portable cellular phone call to make a call to his chief competitor at Bell Laboratories to tell him he had beaten him to the punch. And we did. With that call 35 years ago, the fierce competition that exists today in the wireless industry was born. So this morning we want to wish wireless a very happy 35th birthday, and to celebrate that competitive DNA which has brought so many customers and consumers innovations over the past 3 decades. And who better to help us do that than the father of the mobile phone, Mr. Marty Cooper. Marty, congratulations. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it has been 35 years, but our industry really is still in its infancy. We have only in the past 2 years learned how to make a reliable wireless phone call. We're just learning how to deliver data, but some cataclysmic events are happening. As an example, several of the major carriers have announced open access. New technologies are coming that are going to give us much lower cost and higher speed broadband. Well, this is really a crucial time for our industry. It's really a time when leadership is important, and our industry is blessed by having a leader like Steve Largent representing our industry to everyone else in the world. So, Arlene Harris, my wife, and I have created an award on behalf of our companies. Greg Call, who make the Jitterbug, Raycom, who do spectrum enhancement. And we'd like to present you with an exact replica of the very first portable telephone, signed and numbered and unique. Steve?
Well, thank you very much, Marty. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, Marty, this is to commemorate what you and the team at Motorola accomplished 35 years ago. I'll do a little exchange here. Thank you, Ashley. It was an incredible feat, and billions of consumers around the world benefit from your achievement every single day. So, Marty, thank you for all you've done for the wireless industry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty.
This was a milestone moment in wireless history. The Dynatac was the first device of its kind to offer true portability, giving people the freedom to talk on the go, and ultimately paving the way for the kind of innovation, affordability, and competition we see in the wireless industry today. In 1973, Marty Cooper and colleagues developed the first portable wireless phone, the Dynatac.
Pretty cool, huh? A little tidbit information. From what I understand, when he made that call, he actually almost got hit by a taxi cab while making that call. So here's our number 5 moment.
Wireless moments. At number 5, the FCC allows the deployment of digital advanced cellular technologies in 1988. Leading up to 1988 and the onset of digital technology, there was a sense that this thing called wireless was getting bigger than anybody had ever imagined. In 1983, the FCC established analog as the single uniform standard for cellular service in the U.S. Analog was representative of the early days of wireless. Picture the classic brick phone. Analog cellular phones, such as the brick, worked like an FM radio, sending signals that carried voice information. The analog standard provided a stable environment for the early growth of wireless, but the technology ate up a lot of spectrum, and its limited capacity couldn't accommodate the exponential growth in subscribership that experts were predicting. As the early analog cellular systems approached saturation, wireless companies ran into roadblocks when trying to meet growing consumer demand. The idea of digital was in the air, but the FCC's order mandating analog standards prevented this spectrum-efficient technology from being further developed and deployed. So the FCC took action and made a forward-thinking move in 1988. It established a new order that allowed for the deployment of advanced cellular technologies, opening the door for digital to become a reality. Unlike analog, digital technology encodes information using a binary code of zeros and ones. It's much more efficient with spectrum and increases capacity for varying services. With the door finally opened to digital, the wireless industry surged in innovation, development, and competition that eventually gave birth to new standards such as CDMA, TDMA, and eventually allowed the adoption of GSM. The industry didn't endorse a single standard, and instead companies were free to choose their preferred technology. Today, nearly all wireless subscribers in America use digital services. Increased competition and more efficient technology, such as digital, equal more choice and lower costs for customers, not to mention more advanced features, such as text messaging, internet access, music, and graphics. It's clear to see that consumers have been the ultimate beneficiaries of the digital evolution. The FCC allows the deployment of digital advanced cellular technologies in 1988. The number 5 U.S. wireless moment.
So that's where we go from analog to digital. Could you imagine still having an analog phone? Um, the analog phones being the big, bulky, heavy phones, almost like a AM radio versus now having a digital player. That's what we worked with back in the day, and that was our number 5 top moment. Our number 6 is Hedy Lamar.
Hollywood icon Hedy Lamarr helps develop a spread spectrum approach to communications in 1940. Often called the most beautiful woman in film, Hedy Lamarr graced the silver screen for decades, starring in leading roles with the likes of such legends as Spencer Tracy, Clark Gable, and Jimmy Stewart. But a little-known fact about this Austrian-born beauty is that she also had a mind for science and technology, and later patented an idea that became the foundation for secure military communications and mobile phone technology. The story of Hedy Lamarr's bright idea begins with her first husband, a leading arms dealer in pre-World War II Germany, who was interested in radio-controlled torpedo systems. Having learned a great deal from him, Lamarr came up with an idea for a frequency-hopping technology to control torpedoes, a term now known as spread spectrum. It involved distributing the torpedo guidance signal over several frequencies, thus protecting it from enemy jamming. The only missing link was figuring out how to synchronize the signal's sender and receiver. Desperate to get out from under the Nazi regime and pursue an acting career, Hetty left her husband and made her way to Hollywood in the late 1930s. Her arrival in Tinseltown led to fame and fortune through acting, and also provided the missing link for her spread spectrum idea. In 1940, Hetty struck up a friendship with her neighbor, George Antile, an avant-garde composer interested in her innovative thoughts about radio control. Through their conversations, a partnership and a patent were born. In this photo, you can see Hetty Lamarr in the middle, with Antile beside her on the right. Lamarr realized her spread spectrum idea was like notes in a song. If both the sending device and the receiving device to a torpedo were synchronized on the same note pattern, they'd be able to communicate, and the enemy, who wouldn't know the song, would never find the signal. As a trained pianist, Antile suggested using paper rolls, similar to player piano rolls, to synchronize the frequency changes for the sender and receiver. The device he designed to achieve this synchronization even called for exactly 88 frequencies, the number of keys on a piano. Hoping their invention would contribute to the Allied effort during World War II, Antile and Lamarr offered their secret communication system to the government, and the system was later patented on August 11, 1942. The invention proved to be ahead of its time. U.S. Navy skeptics claimed the mechanism was too bulky to fit into a torpedo and prevented it from being developed. It was some 20 years later that spread spectrum was used as a basic tool for secure military communications on naval ships during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Through the years, technology evolved and emerged into the digital era, and the military eventually released spread spectrum for public use in the 1980s. It enabled wireless companies to make cell phone calls more secure. Today, more than 1,000 spread spectrum patents, including CDMA cell phone technology, Wi-Fi, and the military's Milstar satellite communications network, refer back to the Lamarr-Antile patent as the basis for their technology. From movie star to inventor, Hedy Lamarr was a woman who defied the times. Her vision of spread spectrum helped launch communications into the future by making things more efficient and secure, ultimately paving the way for the most revolutionary technology of our time, wireless.
So that was our number six top 10 wireless moment, and that is still being implemented today. Here's number seven.
The first personal communications services, or PCS, auctions in 1995. Changes in technology and regulation created opportunities for companies to introduce what became known as personal communications services, or PCS. PCS was different from the older cellular service because the FCC's rules effectively limited cellular to basic voice service. PCS, on the other hand, was defined as a broad family of wireless services. Along with voice, other services such as data and video were made available through interconnected, fully digital networks. The development and delivery of other wireless applications was strongly encouraged as well. The FCC originally granted cellular licenses through lengthy, drawn-out comparative hearings, then through a lottery system where some of the winners weren't really interested in offering service, just in selling the licenses to others for a lot of money. That changed in 1993 when Congress authorized the FCC to license spectrum through auctions. This helped speed up the licensing process by quickly getting licenses directly to companies with strong incentives to actually build out wireless networks and offer new services to customers. Under the new plan, the time to issue new licenses was cut in half. With lotteries, it took the FCC 55 months to assign around 600 licenses in the 1980s, while only taking 25 months using auctions to assign more than 2,000 PCS licenses in the 1990s. In fact, the first round of PCS auctions, which assigned the A and B blocks of spectrum, took just 3 months, bringing in more than $7 billion for the U.S. Treasury. 102 PCS licenses in 51 geographic areas were assigned nationwide. These were called major trading areas, and it meant that PCS auctions would eventually provide consumers with twice as many wireless service providers. Later, the auctions increased the number of licenses and potential service providers even more. American Personal Communications, or APC, blazed the trail as the first company in the U.S. to operate in the PCS spectrum. Its network was up and running in the Baltimore, Washington area by the end of 1995, and other PCS licensees quickly followed suit. PCS meant more companies competed to offer consumers innovative new service options and more choices, and forced the existing cellular companies to cut their prices. Since the conclusion of the first PCS auctions in 1995, wireless companies have invested more than $220 billion to deploy and upgrade wireless networks to provide consumers with the most reliable, comprehensive wireless coverage in the world. Today, wireless carriers provide more than 250,000 jobs, and according to a report prepared by an independent research firm, the use of wireless data services alone will contribute at least $860 billion to the U.S. gross domestic product over the next 10 years. The conclusion of the first PCS auctions in 1995. The number 7 U.S. wireless moment. CTIA, the Wireless
Here's number
Association,
eight.
presents a countdown of the top 10 U.S. wireless moments. At number 8, the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993. President Clinton signed the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act into law on August 10, 1993. The act, known as the 93 OBRA, was truly a milestone moment for wireless. This bill marked the first successful attempt at significant telecom policy reform in the U.S. since the Communications Act of 1934. That foundational law established the Federal Communications Commission and its mission to regulate and promote widespread availability of telephone and radio service. Before the 1993 OBRA, the FCC tried issuing cellular licenses through comparative hearings. Overwhelmed administrative law judges were tasked with trying to decide which company's business plan was better than the rest on a market-by-market basis. This lengthy, drawn-out process was full of opportunity for objections and appeals, adding further delays to getting licenses in the hands of service providers. The FCC then tried to speed up the process, moving to a lottery system where licenses were randomly handed out to companies. Unfortunately, the lotteries attracted thousands of speculators looking for easy money. That meant many companies legitimately interested in offering wireless service didn't necessarily win licenses. The 1993 OBRA did away with the lotteries and changed the wireless landscape. It allowed the FCC to use auctions to assign new personal communications service, or PCS licenses. The auction system introduced in the 93 OBRA spurred competition and consumer benefits by effectively putting licenses directly into the hands of the people who had strong incentive to actually build out wireless networks and offer new services to customers. The OBRA also preempted states from regulating how companies could enter markets and what they could charge for service. In other words, instead of the headache of dealing with regulatory hearing rooms, where local regulators could arbitrarily deny licenses or new service offerings, companies could raise capital with confidence, develop and offer new services, and effectively enter and compete in the marketplace under a uniform set of federal rules. As a result of federal preemption of the states, the competitive wireless industry offered consumers innovative services at lower prices, and subscribership took off. President Clinton in the 1993 OBRA successfully changed the Communications Act to better reflect the needs of the marketplace. The introduction of auctions and the establishment of a national framework for regulatory policy through the 1993 OBRA put spectrum to its highest and best use and added billions to our national treasury. The Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993. The number 8 U.S. wireless movement.
And here's our number 9 top moment, and we have one more left.
Moments. At number 9, the 1998 AT&T Digital One Rate Plan. In May 1998, AT&T introduced Digital One Rate. It was the first service plan featuring buckets of minutes, offering subscribers a single all-inclusive rate for incoming or outgoing calls anytime, anywhere in the United States. It also eliminated separate roaming and long-distance charges. Digital One Rate was a huge step for consumer benefit. The innovative plan decreased customer uncertainty about unexpected charges on wireless bills by offering a flat monthly rate for large bundles of minutes, translating into a lower price per minute without the old roaming and long-distance charges. This creative move by AT&T was a dramatic step from wireless service plans and rates based on a complicated web of more than 700 cellular and PCS license areas. Up to that time, customers paid the price with extra roaming and long-distance fees when placing cell phone calls outside their home markets. Leading up to May 1998, new wireless companies were entering the marketplace and fiercely competing to distinguish themselves in order to attract and hang on to customers. This environment of change and experimentation paved the way for Digital One Rate and erased the boundaries that stood in the way of nationwide calling. Consumers loved the bucket plan concept. It was a stunning success, demand was strong, and it led to more wireless subscribers and more minutes of use at an increasingly better value. From 1997, the year before Digital One Rate went into effect, to the year after, total minutes of use increased by 135%, climbing to nearly 150 billion minutes. Within just 3 years, this number skyrocketed all the way up to 450 billion. And, according to FCC competition reports, as minutes of use increased, revenue per minute decreased, falling by 20% between 1998 and 1999 alone. This translated into consumers paying less for more minutes, a clear indication of Digital One Rate's tremendous impact and value. AT&T's innovative approach to wireless service plans also sparked a phenomenal growth in subscribership. From 1997, just 1 year before Digital One Rate arrived, to 2000, only 2 years later, the number of subscribers nearly doubled from 50 to 100 million. With this kind of success, competing companies, including Sprint PCS and Verizon Wireless, realized the appealing value of Digital One Rate and quickly followed AT&T's lead by offering their own bucket plans, fanning the competitive flame of a growing industry. Digital One Rate was a crowning achievement for wireless during the 1990s, and today every major carrier offers consumers multiple versions of it. The introduction of this groundbreaking service plan is a premier example of what happens when consumers drive adoption of services they value in a healthy, competitive marketplace. The 1998 AT&T Digital One Rate Plan, our number 9 U.S. wireless moment.
And last but not least is the Telecom Act of 1996. Take a look.
At number 10, the Telecommunications Act of 1996. President Clinton signed the bill into law on January 3, 1996. It was the first successful attempt to rewrite the nation's telecom laws since the Communications Act of 1934. The new legislation increased competition across the board in the telecommunications industry, moving away from the existing monopolistic environment. During his keynote address at CTIA Wireless 2007 in Orlando, Florida, President Clinton reflected on the significance of the Telecom Act of 96.
3 years before that, I signed the Telecommunications Act, which opened cable and wireless broadband to both increase competition and come together. I know looking back on that act, it seems like some of the language almost sounds like 19th century language. The language was, in a way, too antiquated to keep up with what the technology was doing. And there have been some criticisms of it, but on balance, I think there's no question that lots and lots of jobs were created, hundreds of thousands because of it, and it enabled a flowering of competitive pressures, which created a lot of new opportunities for many of you and for a lot of our fellow Americans.
The law was a major milestone in wireless history. It further established a national framework that continues to spark the competitive wireless industry we know today. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, the number 10 U.S. wireless moment. Find out what's number 9 on the list right here on February 1st.
So there you have it, our top 10 moments in wireless history. And so, speaking of wireless history, who are the governing bodies of our telecommunications? We've all heard of the FCC, but many of you know that the FCC essentially they regulate all forms of telecommunications. That includes internet, telephone, television, satellite, and cable. And then we have the Standards Committee, IEEE. They call it for short, which is the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineer. Now, they are one of the most influential standards of bodies in which they are responsible for coming up with such popular standards that we are familiar with as the 802.11, which is Wi Fi, and the various versions of that, as well as some other standards that are popular across different wireless. And then the Wi Fi Alliance is a nonprofit industry organization that was founded to drive the adoption of these standards that the IEEE come up with and to make sure that they're implemented properly. And so they take organizations and businesses through a rigorous process to make sure that they are in line with the standards that IEEE comes up with. So our focus for this class from a wireless technology, we're going to cover Wi-Fi, obviously. We're going to cover GPS, RFID, NFC, near field communications, Bluetooth, and cellular. And in the vein of with most of the focus being on Wi-Fi, the vein of Wi-Fi, we're going to talk about how Wi-Fi works, understand the wireless networking, etc. And so I have a little clip for you to show you the Wi-Fi standards and how some of it work. Take a look.
Before we get into the details, I think it's important to have a brief overview of the current state of wireless technology. When Wi-Fi really started to get popular around early 2001, the standard in use was 802.11b. It had a range of about 150 feet and was able to transfer data at a speed of up to 11 megabits per second. It also operated in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency spectrum, which it shared with cordless phones and other wireless electronics. Microwave ovens also throw out interference at that frequency when they're being used. Now, 802.11b was supposed to be eventually replaced with a similar standard called 802.11a. And while it had a more limited range, it operated at almost 4 times the speed of 802.11b, and it also operated at 5 gigahertz, which was rarely used for consumer devices, meaning it would have much less interference. The problem was, by that time, 802.11b had taken off so successfully that no one wanted to buy a wireless device that wasn't backwards compatible with 802.11b because most people already had expensive devices that already operated on B. So 802.11a never really took off, but some computers today, like all Intel-based Macs, can operate on 802.11a. But the next standard to be adopted by the industry was 802.11g. 802.11g is nearly identical to 802.11a, but it operates on the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, making it backwards compatible with B devices, which made it easier for people to transition to this standard. The problem was that if a B device joined the G network, then the speed of the entire network would have to drop back down to the maximum B speed of 11 megabits per second. So fast forward to today, where we have the latest standard called 802.11n. Wireless N has a practical range of about 175 feet, and it supports theoretical speeds of up to 300 megabits per second, although realistically you'll probably get closer to half that speed. It's also capable of operating on either the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz frequency range. So it can support wireless B and G devices if you still have those devices on your network, but it will slow down the network down to the maximum speed of either the B or G device that's connected. Most modern computers and Wi-Fi devices, though, are now wireless and compatible. So if you only have those type of devices on your network, you could see some decent transfer speeds. But you're going to find that the speed and range of your network is going to depend largely on where you place your wireless router in your home or office, and that's what we're going to take a look at next.
And that's how wireless networks work. You see some of those standards that was created by IEEE, and you see the difference in how you sacrifice range for speed and vice versa. Let's take a look at some of the access points. You guys are probably familiar with what an access point is. Essentially, if you got a home network, you know that the access point is the device that actually takes in that signal that connects you to the internet and broadcast it so that your mobile devices can connect to it. Let's take a look at the wireless technology's progress trends. Now, on the left column, you'll see the Wi-Fi trends from 1997 to 2012. And on the right side, you'll see the mobile cellular trends, started with 1G all the way up to our latest LTE. I want you to take a look at something. Look at in 1997, 802.11, the speed of that was 2 megabits per second. That was in 1997. If you look at between 1991 and 2003, let's even take 2001, the speed for 3G was 384 kilobits per second. Just to put things in perspective, kilobit is 1,000 bits per second. A megabit is 1 million bits per second, and it goes up every per thousand. And so, if you look at the trends from 1997 to 2012, IEEE standards have improved the standard of wireless speed from 2 megabits per second all the way up to a gigabit per second with our latest 802.11 AC standard. And the cellular part is still teetering away. FCC has kind of handicapped the wireless innovation in this area over the years, as you've seen in some of the history in the top 10 moments in wireless history. But they're just getting up to 100 megabits per second download from LTE. And most cases, you can't even get that speed. So I want you to take a look at that now. As we get improvement on our cellular innovation perspective, we can get faster speeds and you'll be able to do more things with your mobile devices. So what could you do with the speeds that you have now? If you put this in perspective, just to get from an audio, from a digital multimedia and audio speed, just to get a generally accepted speech, you need 32 kilobits per second. And then, MP3s, you stream those at 128 all the way up to 320 kilobits per second for audio. But if you take a look at video, of course, video demands more capacity than audio. And so for standard definition of video, that typically puts you at about 3.5 megabits per second. To if you at the point in which we're able to stream real time high definition, uh, at the high definition quality video, that's 8 to 15 megabits per second. But if you're looking at 720p or 1080, you're looking at 19 to 25 megabits per second. So our cellular technology still has a way to go to get to the streaming part of it. There's some encoding techniques that allow you to buffer some HD, but as far as being on the wire, a cellular side, you would have to connect to a Wi-Fi connection to get speeds that are up to that rate to be able to stream high definition video. And so that was the wireless history. That's the signal itself, the wireless history. Let's take a look at the history of mobile. and pull up the. I have an infographic on how the world went mobile. You can pull that up and follow along with me, or you can just follow along through the lecture. But we learned that Dr. Cooper in '73 came up with a prototype that was never commercialized, but this was the prototype. He almost got hit in New York City making that call, the first portable cell phone call. And then in 1983, they commercialized the Motorola Dynatac. $4,000 to get you this cell phone and stored only on 30 phone numbers. In '93, IBM came out with the Simon, which was literally the first PDA plus phone. It was the world's first smartphone, actually. It had a touchscreen, pager, calculator, address book, email, etc. But it cost you $900. And then in 2002, the hip top called Sidekick came out, and this was actually the creators the of this phone went on to build Android for Google, and the hip top was sold to Microsoft for $500 million. In 2002, the BlackBerry was RIM's first entry into phones, where they combined their PDA technology with a phone, and that cost you $500. And then Sanyo came out with the first camera phone. The phone on the you see the camera phone with the photo on the front of it cost you $400 as well. And many of you may remember the Motorola Razor. I know I had one as well. It's pretty much was probably the most popular phone at the time. It represented 3 out of 4 handsets in 2007. It was a really sleek flip phone. And then in 2007, the world changed with the iPhone. No need for explanation. I'm sure you all know what the iPhone is. 2008, T-Mobile came out with the G1. This was the first Android operating system on a phone. And then in 2010, HTC came out with the Evo, which was the first phone capable of reaching 4G speeds in the US. It cost you $450. And then the iPhone 4S came out in 2011. And so those were the phone items. I want to move on to the tablets, because the tablets are a little known history about the tablets, because not many of them really took off. In 1968, Alan Key conceptualized the Dynabook. Dynabook never left the stage. It was just a concept. And then in '71, um, Elo Graphics developed a patent firewire touchscreen called the AccuTouch, and that technology will be used in all types of devices. And in '83, HP Hewlett Packard came out with a optical touchscreen. It was the infrared sensor that detect fingertip movements. 4 years later, the Linus Write Top came out that lets you write directly on the screen and included a stylus. And then in 1989, the GridPad came out, which was built by Samsung and had a 640 by 480 monochrome display. At the time, these were all black and white screens. In 1991, the Pocket Computer Corporation introduced the Pocket Pad. This is the first pad type device developed by Fujitsu. And then the Momentum computer, which was controlled via a pen like stylus, was developed to bridge the gap between a pen only system and a keyboard. And so, looking at a lot of these tablet type devices, the history of them, there's not many of them that you're probably familiar with. Um, if we take a look at it, see some that stands out would be that IBM created the first touch tone phone, called the Simon. Um, and then Apple introduced the Newton message pad, which was a touchscreen PDA, but wasn't a success, and so they killed off that series. Some notable standouts was in 2001, Bill Gates introduced a tablet PC, which was a mobile computer that came with a stylus and Windows XP. And in 2004, the Pepper Pad was designed as a couch top computer. Um, you know, perfect for, take a look at this, casual web browsing, emailing, and instant messaging, and features software for managing MP3s, pictures, and movies. That sounds like our tablet today. If I take a look at some of the other notable standouts, you'll see in 2006, Microsoft and Intel developed the Ultra mobile PC with touchscreen. It was one of the most known models for this not so successful type of computer was the Samsung Q1. And then in 2007, obviously the iPhone came out, but in 2010, the iPad was introduced, and the iPad changed the landscape of tablet devices since then. Samsung did come out with the Galaxy Tab in 2010, which was the first 7-inch tablet that kind of had some competition for the iPad, but not really. And then the Motorola came out with their Motorola Zoom in 2011. And so that was essentially the history of our tablet devices, history of our mobile devices, and also the history of wireless and some of the events that kind of molded and shaped our wireless landscape. Now I want to talk about the history of sports marketing. Let's take a look at some of the really cool things that shaped our sports marketing history. In 1858, believe it or not, this was the first known athletic event that required paid admissions. Baseball game charged 50 cents with attendance records varying from 1,500 to 10,000. And then in 1923, Gene got the first endorsement deal with Wilson Sporting Goods. This endorsement deal was for 6,000 a year plus an equal amount for travel expenses, and it renewed every 2 years until he died in May of 1999. That is a 76 long year endorsement deal that Gene had from Wilson. And then 1925, the Goodyear blimp. It's the first time you see the Goodyear blimp fly over athletic events. You can think of it as a wireless advertising. And then in 1928, Coke partners with the Olympics and remains a sponsor to this day. And there's where you see a big brand comes into a sporting event for a sponsorship partner. And in 1939, on August the 30th, this was the first televised collegiate football game featuring Fordham against Waynesburg. October 22nd, in 1939, the first televised NFL game happened on this date. Broadcast to 1,000 homes. The Eagles fell to the Brooklyn Dodgers. Yep, there was a such thing as the Brooklyn Dodgers. And in 1949, Babe was the first major endorsement deal by a female, Babe Dickerson. Um, she signed also with Wilson Sporting Goods for $100,000 a year. I think they took heed to that lifetime endorsement deal and started increasing the amount per year. In 1951, NBC broadcast the first live coast-to-coast sporting event. It's a football game featuring Duke versus the University of Pittsburgh. And in 1954, Sports Illustrated. That's the initiation of Sports Illustrated hits the newsstand. 10 years later, Blue Ribbon Sports was founded. Blue Ribbon Sports is what you know as Nike. Phil Knight founded Blue Ribbon Sports, which in 1972 became Nike. And then in 1966, 2 years later, you can thank Ohio State marketing department for the very degree that you're taking now. This was the first sports marketing degree program in the nation. And in 1975, Ali versus Frazier. This is the first pay-per-view athletic event called the Thriller in Manila, which Ali won to Frazier in the 14th round. It was broadcast at 276 closed circuit locations, and Frazier's trainer threw in the towel. And our lives changed in 1979. ESPN, dun dun dun, dun dun dun. ESPN debuted on September the 7th of 1979, and in 84, for the first time, the Olympics is privately financed and shows a profit. In 1990, Fairfax County Schools high school sports marketing program started showing up around 1990, first appearing in Fairfax County schools. Since then, sports marketing has become one of the fastest growing marketing related course offerings in the country. So you guys are ahead of the game. You're in a high pace, high trending course offering in the country, and you still have time to create the history. And if you look at from 46 to 1980, The Godfather. as he's been called, of sports marketing, Mr. Bill Veck, introduced ballpark giveaways, exploding scoreboards, player names on jerseys, Wrigley Fields, ivy covered walls, etc. He was the godfather of sports marketing. And there you have it, folks. That's our evolution of mobility, technology, wireless, and sports. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I tried to keep you under an hour, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye bye.